So often I get frustrated at the miter saw cross-cutting because it never seems to come out right. I do much better at the miter saw, and I know that really a table saw should be more accurate. So today I think I have found a product that's going to change my opinion about cross-cutting at this table saw. It's an Osborne miter gauge, and it uses a beam element to keep the angle much more exact than you can get with a protractor style miter gauge. So today I'm going to do an unboxing and we're going to check this thing out. Now this is what is known as a protractor style miter gauge, and like the name implies, if I want to cut at an angle, I rotate it to that angle, tighten it down, and away I go. Now the problem with this is there's 180 degrees in half of a circle, and this thing is quite small, so trying to find exactly the right angle and get it in the right spot can be challenging. Usually you have to use like a square or something between the miter gauge and the blade to get your angle exactly right, and then you can cut. And of course I can come back to 90 degrees. Now another problem with this miter gauge is that the bar it's mounted to is just straight the whole way. So in order for it to fit in the table and glide smoothly, there's clearance. And if I try to wiggle it after it's locked down, I can feel that clearance. I can wiggle this thing maybe 1/4 of a degree. And not only is it wiggling in the groove, it's also wiggling in the joint between the miter gauge and the bar. So look very closely, you can see that there's just quite a bit of play there. And that's why I haven't had good success with my miter gauge on my table saw. So this miter gauge comes out of the box pretty much assembled. I put the abrasive tape on the front, and I put a slippery glide tape on the bottom. They give you the stop that's pre-assembled for a left side cut, which is what I want, and I think most woodworkers want. So put that on, and then just install the handle. So this miter gauge can be set up on either side of the blade. Right now it's set up to be on the right side. Well, normally I cut with mine on the left, and I think most woodworkers do. So to reverse it, these knobs come apart, and then you take this off, and then this mechanism, if you unlock it, it comes apart, and the whole mechanism can just rotate to the other side and then get reassembled. And I'm going to lock it back at 0. And then I just put the miter gauge back on this side. And all I got left to do is put the extension on the other side of the blade. And there's a locking for the extension, the locking knobs on both sides, so you don't have to switch that. So now I'm all set to cut on the other side of my blade. Alright, let's try it out. Uh-oh, doesn't fit. So if your table saw is like mine and has a straight groove, you don't need this little catch that comes with this. So with the Phillips screwdriver, it looks like I can take that right off. Installation take 2. There we go. Wow, that slides pretty snugly as it is. I wouldn't have considered any aftermarket miter gauge that didn't have a way of taking up the clearance between the bar and the groove. And you can see that's what these slits are for. You can see they milled out a hole there, and then put a slit between them. And this Allen screw, as I tighten down on it, it widens the whole bar. So it can take up all that space and have essentially a 0 clearance fit. Now this is pretty close. Looks like I need to just adjust this one down here. It's amazing how fine that adjustment can get. There we go. Man, that's amazing. That works really well. So now I've gotten down to business. I've taken my most trustworthy square and I've placed it in the miter gauge and put it against my blade. And out of the box, my miter gauge is not square. I've got it locked here based on the 0 detent, so it should truly be 90. And now to correct this, this pivot is on an eccentric bolt. So it won't work with the Allen wrench they gave you, but you loosen up this screw, and then with a 3/4 inch wrench you can adjust this eccentric bolt, and you can see how it lengthens my hypotenuse when I turn it. So I'll hold it against and I'll just pivot it until it's square with the blade. Now it looks like I've got it right there, so I'll tighten it down. You have to be a little careful because as you tighten it, it changes that eccentric bolt, so it's going to take a little bit of playing with. But I'm much closer than I was. And there, I've got it exactly square. What I found I had to do is I had to compensate by moving the bolt one direction so that when I tightened it, it always moved it the same way when I tightened it. It's not bad, you just have to fiddle with it and you'll get it perfectly square. So this is a hypotenuse style miter gauge. Degree marks are actually on this hypotenuse bar, and there's an indicator, and to change the angle it's got a button you press on the bottom that'll lock in the preset detents. So it looks like every 5 degrees, including 22.5, and what's cool is it goes all the way to 45 in and 45 out. And if you love geometry like me, check out this bar. See how the marks are closer together at this side of the bar than they are up here? That's just because of the geometry of the Pythagorean theorem. It tells us that to gain an angle here, the hypotenuse doesn't change nearly as much as it does when you're up here. So to change a degree, you have to move the hypotenuse more here than you do up here. So that's why you always will get a more accurate cut if you cut this way. Since your degree markings are further apart, you get greater resolution. Another cool feature of this miter gauge is that I can unlock this and I can slide this whole bar in and out. So if I tilt my blade or something, I can get it as close or as far away from the blade as I want. Of course, that messes up the tape measure on the top, which is why I haven't installed it yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to. Well, I decided to install my measuring tape after all. I've got a known length block that I cut at the miter saw. It's 8 inches and it's square on both sides. I got my stop block against that block and the block against the blade. And so that I know where I was at when I did this, I'm going to put a Sharpie mark right here where the miter gauge meets the carriage. And that'll tell me where to be at in order to use my indexing. Okay, now let's put this miter gauge through its paces. First, the 90-degree cut. Look at that, beautiful. It's a little unwieldy at that, because there's a lot of mass, it's a little unwieldy at that angle. But let's see how it did. Look at that, perfect 135-degree angle. Now let's cut it at a 45-degree angle. Look at that, I could start making squares. Nice and flush. So, do I think I'm going to be using my miter gauge a lot more than my miter saw? Maybe so. Only time will tell what habits, maybe it'll take me a while to get out of the kick of using the miter saw, but I certainly like this thing. One of my favorite features about it is that none of this that you see here is plastic. Even this black piece is actually powder-coated aluminum. It's not plastic. It's really a well-made miter gauge. I'm very impressed with it. It's almost like woodpecker's quality, the way they don't cut any corners. So I'm excited to use it and see how I like it.